We are live, probably, maybe. Hope you are here. Hope you're doing well tonight. And we will get started in about 10 minutes from the time you see this. So, got plenty of time to hang out for a bit, go pop some popcorn, get a drink, whatever it is you like to do. And we'll get started real soon. Got a few things to take care of, so you'll just hang tight. Like I said, we'll get started now in about 9 minutes, so just hang out. All right. Well, my handwriting is bad. My Hebrew handwriting is even worse, but let's try. Okay. This is a noon resh vav. Let's try that. There we go. Oh, that's right. It doesn't show up very well on the screen. Well, I'm going to do what I can. And resh vav. And another noon. Then we have. Well, that's not so bad. All right. Okay. Kof. This one's easy. It's a Sonic. And last but not least, another Resh. Okay, and so that is basically in our, we'll call that an O in, this is a Q. K, Q. I think it looks more like a Q, so I call it a Q. Also, if a Q is at the beginning of the word, you go K. And if a K is at the beginning of the word, you go K. Am I the only one that feels that way? Anyway, this isn't actually part of the lesson. Well, I mean, it's going to be part of the lesson eventually. But remember, we're not starting for another 7 minutes, so just hang out for a little bit. I see Paige Turner says popcorn is a good idea. Absolutely. Snacks are always good. Gwen Pasby says good evening. Glad to hear from you, Gwen. We got 5 people here, so I'm just setting up a few more things. This is an S, and this is another R. All right, very good. And of course, this says Risky Norn. No, it's Hebrew, so we read it backwards. See if you can figure out what this says before I get to that part of my lesson by reading backwards. There's a little bit of a trick to it, but we'll get to that later. So, right. And we'll get started in about 6 minutes, so hang out just a little bit longer. Just a little bit. Got notifications. Are they important notifications? No. Good. sharing this a couple places, just making sure that people can find it. Doug and Sarah are present. Doug and Sarah, always good to hear from you. We'll get started in about 5 minutes, so everyone just hang tight. All right. Yeah, all right. We got people coming in. This is good. Let's make sure my phone is live here. Very good. All right. We'll get started about 4 minutes. And we're doing chapters 12, 13, and 14 tonight. So, if you haven't read them yet, they're really short chapters. You can do it right now. You just have to read really, really fast. But if you haven't read, that's okay, because we're probably going to read most of it tonight, because this is dense stuff, and we got to make sure we know what we're talking about. So, a lot happening tonight. So I didn't take as many notes as usual. So this is going to be like those Sundays where I don't have my sermon quite as written, and I tend to ramble a little bit more. You all have been warned. And yep, got about another 3 minutes till we get started. I wonder why on my phone, because I pull up the stream on my phone just to have another eye on it, and it doesn't tell me who's here, and I don't know why. It makes me sad. Oh well. That's right, I'm live. Swipe to reveal comments and reactions. There we go. It just takes a little bit. John Parrish says good evening. John, good to see you. Hope my mouth and my words are in sync today. Um, I uploaded the video from last week onto YouTube, and apparently the audio was completely off. So if anybody tried to watch on YouTube over the past week, I'm very sorry that was so terrible, and hoping to fix that tomorrow. So. All right, we'll get started in about 2 minutes here, so everyone just hang on a little bit. And everyone, of course, wonder why I have the code Rescue Norn back here, or however you pronounce that. However you pronounce that. All right, we'll get started in about 2 minutes. So glad you all have been here week after week. I think we're good to go. Let me make sure that my phone is extra silent. Would not do to have it buzzing around. Also, I've made sure that Dwayne won't be coming into the room and scaring the pants off of me like he did last week, so we won't have to all go through that again. Although no, that was funny. He got a good laugh about that later. I got a good laugh out of it later. As always, as we go through the stream, let me know if there are any problems, stream cuts out or anything like that. We had a couple issues with that on Sunday, and I don't know if they were related to Facebook or us or the internet. I had no idea. So just if anything like that happens, just let me know, and that way I can back up a little bit. John Bowie says, good evening. John, good to have you here with us. Good to have all of you here, in fact. According to Facebook, we got 8 eyes on this, and I know a couple of people there are coupled up, so looks like we got a pretty good group with us. All right. Marty says, hello, I have questions. Should I wait until the lesson is over? Go ahead and feel free to ask those in the comments right now. And I might be able to get to them like during the lesson. And then if I don't get to them during the lesson, then I'll definitely, because I'll go back through and I'll answer them afterwards. So definitely ask. And at the end of the lesson, I'll definitely get to all of those that I didn't already get to, if that makes any sense. A lot of your questions I might just get to. So, That's kind of my hope. So anyway, glad to have you here. Always glad to have people asking questions. So and it's 8:03, so let's go ahead and get started. This is going to help me find the spot for editing later on. Good evening. Welcome to Wednesday evening Bible study. This is our fourth week of studying the book of Revelation, and this week we get into the really good stuff. This is the part of Revelation that everybody thinks about when they think about the book of Revelation. We have dragons rising from the sea, and we have beasts, and we have this mysterious mark that people get on their forehead or on the back of their hand. We have a mysterious number. Oh, we have all sorts of good stuff. And this is why a lot of people are here, because this is where we get lots of questions about what the heck Revelation is trying to say, and we get all these images of stuff going on in heaven and earth. And so tonight I think is going to be really exciting. Because tonight is so important, it's really going to do good for us to review just kind of some of the stuff that we've learned. Um, so a few things first. First of all, remember the purpose of a book of prophecy. Um, a book of prophecy is not about just letting people know what's going to happen in the future so that they have secret knowledge that other people don't. Um, we only know the future from a book of prophecy in as much as we understand God's purposes for the world, and we understand who God is, what God is like. And because we know what God is like, we also know inevitably what's going to happen eventually and throughout humanity, because we know what God is like. Um, and prophecy also is mostly about shedding light on this world. I made the comparison a few weeks ago to the story of Christmas Carol, where Scrooge is given a vision of the future, but he asks the question: is this a vision of what must be, or is this a vision of what could be? Because if it's a vision of what could be, I will go back and change myself. When this is when he's seen the future with the ghost of Christmas future. And so that's something to be asking ourselves: is this all about the future, or is this about warning us about what could happen and warning us about the shape of things in the future so that we can react appropriately? Second thing, and this is always really important: Revelation is not about code. Even when we get to that discussion of the number 666, and we're going to be talking about some things that people kind of think of as being in code. Um, Revelation doesn't deal with code that we have to decipher. It has to do with symbols that we interpret. And the difference there, it's like I said, when you look at the American flag, for instance, you don't look at the American flag and immediately think, oh, 13 stripes for the 13 original colonies and 50 stars for the 50 states, and blue means this and red means that and white means. No, your thoughts immediately go to what the flag represents in our society, what the flag represents in the world, what the flag might represent to us personally. The flag is a symbol in that regard, and it's not a code. Um, and the third thing that is really important to remember is that Revelation uses images from the language that the people had. Revelation is not about giving us new information so much as it is about explaining the present and explaining the world, but it uses references to the Old Testament and what we call that intertestamental period in between the Old and the New Testament, because that's the language people knew. Nowadays, I might use quotes from movies. I might use images. I might talk about, Jedi Knights and Darth Vader, and you would know who I was talking about even if you haven't seen Star Wars. I might talk about a yellow brick road and a pair of ruby slippers, and you would know what I talked about even if you didn't really like The Wizard of Oz. Well, remember, John is going to be using symbols that people in his time would have understood, stories that they would have understood. So those three things, definitely keep those in mind as we explore these books tonight. The other thing too is that John has set up a pattern for us in the book of Revelation. Um, First, it was seven seals, then it was seven trumpets, and then each one of those there would be six things that would happen, and then the seventh one would show us something about the church, and then six bad things would happen, and then the seventh would show us about the church. And we're going to do that again here in a couple of chapters with these bowls. But instead of bowls, now we are going to take a break. And we're going to break up the pattern a little bit to uh, see some really wild images. Um, it's important when we go into this to know that these are images, again, not code. And the thing about images is that these words would have been heard to the people that are originally hearing them. We have an advantage that the people who originally heard this book do not have been able to read passages over and over again and to go back and what did that say and how does that relate to that. But if you were hearing this for the first time, if you were one of the churches that received this letter from John and you were sitting in church basically on Sunday morning and someone opened up the scroll and just read it, you wouldn't have the opportunity to go back and read and ponder and cut out little bits and pieces. Um, and so it's important to let the whole scene sort of wash over you. I recommended a few weeks ago if you have the opportunity, and I'd still recommend it. Listen to the book of Revelation. Go find an audio book. Go to YouTube. There are places where they read it on YouTube. You can go to the library and get an audio book. All sorts of ways to hear the story being read and just listen rather than read, lose track of time, read a few chapters, go do something else, read, get bored, go do, just listen to the entire thing. It takes about an hour. Um, so let's get into it. Let me read you another story really quickly. This is a famous Greek legend, also would have been a Roman legend. The Romans kind of worshipped the Greek gods, kind of repurposed. A lot of them had new names. So, excuse me, Zeus became Jupiter, and Ares became Mars, and all of these sort of things. But they were essentially the same stories, just repackaged into a different language. And so this is a very very brief summary from a great commentary on Revelation that talks about one of these Greek myths. Let's read this. It says, not far from John's island prison is the island of Delos, sacred to the Greeks because, in a story known to all John's hearers from childhood, there, on this island, the island of Delos, there the divine Apollo had been born. His mother, Leto, had fled there to escape the dragon Python, who wanted to kill the newborn son of Zeus. That's Apollo. Instead of being killed, Apollo returns to Delphi and kills the dragon. The basic outline of this plot is found in the mythical folklore of many peoples. So many people have heard a story like this, but it was especially powerful in the Greek and the Roman world of a story of someone who was born from a god in heaven, whose mother was persecuted by a dragon, and the dragon wanted to eat up the child, and the child came back and slayed the dragon. That is the same story that we read in chapters 12 and 13, except now it's used in a Christian context. We have this mother figure up in heaven who gives birth to a child, and there's a dragon that wants to eat the child. But the child is snatched away. And we're given promise that the child is going to come back at last and conquer the dragon. And so, John's readers who would have read this story in Revelation or heard the story read to them, they would have said, wait a second, now I know this story, but you're telling it differently this time. And So what does it mean that you're telling it differently? What do the differences mean? And a lot of the details are some of the differences. So let's read from chapter 12. A great portent appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head was a crown of 12 stars. Remember, 12 always having to do with the tribes of Israel, or maybe with the 12 disciples. And so this woman, the jewels in her crown are the 12 tribes, the 12 disciples. We don't exactly know, but the jewels are, these people that are the people of God. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pangs in the agony of giving birth. Then another portent appeared in heaven, a great red dragon with 7 heads, representing power, and 10 horns. That's a lot of horns. Probably the people at the time, they would have heard the reference to Daniel, where there is another very similar beast that has 10 horns. Exactly what the 10 horns mean, I couldn't tell you. It has 7 diadems on his head. Oh, he's a great ruler as well. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. So he has power even in heaven. Um, we're gonna get back to that, but just imagine for now, just kind of hear this story. His power, even in heaven. Then the dragon stood before the woman who was about to bear a child, so that he might devour her child as soon as it was born. And she gave birth to a son, a male child, who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. All right, so this is Jesus, obviously. But her child was snatched away and taken to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, so that there she could be nourished for 1,260 days. Again, that 1,260 days, you'll often hear it as 42 months. It's 3.5 years. It's halfway through that cycle of 7. So it's in the middle of an age. It's in the middle of everything. But after this, verse 7, a war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. So let's talk about Michael for a second. Sometimes you'll hear that there are 4 archangels, sometimes you'll hear that there are 7. The idea held by Jewish, again, tradition. This isn't Jewish scripture, this is Jewish tradition. Slight difference there. But Jewish tradition held that there were 7 archangels, and the archangels sort of ruled over different parts of the world, different nations. Now we kind of think of 7 continents, so I almost sort of think of it like that. Except Michael, who was the chief archangel, he was the leader of all the kings, but he also personally looked after Israel. Another way of saying that is when we see Michael appear, Michael is sort of the angel that represents Israel. And so Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon and his angels fought back, but they were defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. The great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. All right. Um, so here we also have to remember in Luke and some of the other gospels, there's a time when Jesus sends many disciples out into villages, and when they get back, and they say, we did all these great deeds of power and we really spread your word and it was really amazing, and Jesus, in congratulating them, he says, I saw Satan fall from heaven like lightning. um, and that's a strange verse if you take it in context. Many people have taken it out of context and said this is talking about Jesus seeing the fall of Satan from heaven. And from here, we get this great big story about a war in heaven at the beginning of time, and how Satan was an angel, was Lucifer, who rebelled against God, and gathered an army of other rebellious angels. And there was a war, and he lost, and he was cast down onto earth. But we don't really have that here, because you have to look at, again, this is in Luke, you have to look at that in the broader picture. Seeing Satan fall from heaven, seeing Satan cast out of heaven is sort of a way of saying Satan has no power there. Satan has no power there anymore. Heaven is where all the power is, and if Satan isn't in heaven, then he does not have ultimate power. Um, Really, the Bible doesn't talk a whole lot about who Satan is, where Satan comes from. It's always in this heavily symbolic language, heavily metaphorical language. And so when we read about this war in heaven, it's best not to think about it as being um, history. Remember the important point that John uses images that he already knows about, and that his hearers would have already known about to tell more important stories. Really, what we have a story here is about Jesus's cosmic victory. Let's go just a little bit further, and then maybe I can explain what I mean. Verse 10. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven proclaiming, "Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah, for the accuser of our comrades has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. But they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they did not cling to life even in the face of death. Rejoice then, you heavens, and those who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you with great wrath, because he knows that his time is short." So, the most important, in my opinion, the most important verse there is verse 11. But they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb. Satan has been cast out of heaven by the blood of the Lamb. But if we were to follow this story, this legend that this war in heaven happened at the very beginning of time, and that this passage out of Revelation is kind of revealing that to us, um, it doesn't work. How then could he be thrown out by the blood of the Lamb? Because Jesus hasn't died yet. Really, what is happening here is by the blood of the Lamb, Satan's ultimate power, the ultimate power of evil over our lives, over the world, over the cosmos, evil has basically been told, stuff it, you're not going to win. Your power has been vanquished. That power has moved down to the earth, though, but because its time is short. So all of the evil that's here on earth, all of the horrible things that happen, all the sadness, all the grief, all the tragedy, all the anger, all the hate, all of this is short. The time for it is short, and it does not have the ultimate power. Um, and so going back, then we have to kind of ask about, okay, what about that woman, the woman who gives birth? John is throwing together a lot of images here at once. Some people, most famously, people have interpreted this as Mary. I mean, it's Mary who gives birth to Jesus, and from here you have the images of Mary as the Queen of Heaven and Mary as this special set apart. But this woman is also related somehow to Israel. I mean, she's got the 12 stars in her crown. Um, and so she means a lot of things. But I really do think of it as it's the faithful crowd that comes both before and after Jesus, through whom Jesus arrived. You could call that Israel, you could call it the Jewish people, you could call it God's providence. You could just call it humanity. And we're going to see here in a little bit that she has other children as well, and those other children, I think, are us, the believing community. All right. So in John's vision, let's back up a little bit. Let's just get back to the vision. Satan's been thrown out of heaven. The kind of the ultimate battle has already been fought, and everything that's going to happen now is sort of cleanup. Um, um, And a way to think of that, of course, is that because Jesus has died, because Jesus gave up his power, it is in that act that Jesus gained ultimate power. And the and through that, evil doesn't have ultimate power. And so all the evil is this temporary, temporal, ultimately powerless power that we have here on Earth. If I appear to be rambling and going in circles a little bit, John's visions kind of call for that. But let's continue. In verse 13, it says, "So when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given the two wings of the great eagle, so that she could fly from the serpent into the wilderness to her place where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time. Then from his mouth the serpent poured water like a river after the woman, to sweep her away with the flood. But the earth came to the help of the woman. It opened its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had poured from his mouth. And the dragon was angry with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her children, those who keep the commandments of God and hold the testimony of Jesus." Again, this smacks of all the imagery of Israel, of the Hebrews, of the chosen people. Um, they evil tries to devour them. Evil tries to beat them. But first they escape to the wilderness. Remember how much last week we talked about Exodus and the plagues, and eventually being able to escape from Pharaoh into the wilderness. And then the next thing that comes to help is the earth. Remember, the earth is not evil. The earth is not a bad thing. It's been corrupted, but it's ultimately God's good creation. So here, the earth comes to help for the woman. Again, you can imagine it as the people coming to the promised land. They're able to plant their own fields. They're able to sit under vine and fig tree. The earth helps the children of Israel to survive. And so now the devil has turned his mind. Evil is turning its attention to all the rest of the world, the people who hold the commandments of God and hold the testimony of Jesus. An easy way to talk about the Jewish people and the Christians. Now we're going to get some beasts. See if you recognize these beasts. Verse 18, "Then the dragon took his stand on the sand of the seashore. And I saw a beast rising out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads." It sounds a lot like the dragon. "And on its horns were 10 diadems." Sounds a lot like the dragon. "And on its heads were blasphemous names." What would a blasphemous name be? Would that just be a word that sounds dirty? Would that just be a mean thing to say? No, this is a blasphemy. This is a name that says, "I am God." This is a name that says, "I am the Lord." This is a name who says, "You shall worship me." Um, Keep that in mind. "And the beast that I saw was like a leopard, its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And the dragon gave it his power and his throne and great authority." Now, this is interesting. One of the heads seemed to have received a death blow, but its mortal wound had been healed. In amazement, the whole earth followed the beast. They worshipped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it?" So the name of the beast is blasphemous. And then in verse 5, "The beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. Also, it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them, and it was given authority over every tribe and people and language and nation, and all the inhabitants of the earth will worship it. Everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb that was slaughtered." Imagine, imagine a person, a being, a group of people who constantly utter all kinds of terrible blasphemies. They say, "We are the rulers," or "I am the ruler," "I am king," "I am God," "I am your voice," "I am the one who you shall worship." Um, we've talked so much in the past about how religious the state of Rome was, how religious the empire was, and the empire was this great, big, powerful beast. Here we see Rome represented by this beast, and not just Rome, but all Romes, everything that's like a Rome. And especially what really cues us into that, which we may not understand here in the 21st century, but they would have known about it in the first century, was this bit about one of them having received a death blow, but its mortal wound had been healed. The first Christian to actively, or sorry, the first emperor to actively persecute Christians was Emperor Nero. And Nero, at the end of his life, at the end of his madness, by all accounts, he committed suicide. But there were so many people that had lived in terror under Nero for so long that they could not believe it. And this persistent rumor existed during the age that Nero was going to come back, that Nero had escaped, or that Nero had hidden away, or that Nero was going to be revived. I mean, there are these really, really persistent, pervasive rumors that Nero wasn't really gone. And so Emperor Nero is represented here as the one who has been hurt but has been healed. This beast is the power of Rome. And for us who don't live under Roman authority anymore, it's the power of any all-encompassing empire, all any all-encompassing way of life that tries to set itself up as God, becomes a parody, a sort of a mockery, or a pale imitation of God. But then there's a second beast in verse 11, another beast, but this one rises out of the earth. It has two horns like a lamb, and it spoke like the dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast on its behalf. And so we have the dragon here in the background. Dragon brings up the first beast, and the first beast has all the authority. And then the first beast pops up, or it brings up a second beast, and then the second beast has authority on behalf of the first beast and talks a lot like the dragon. So dragon, first beast, second beast. And it makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound had been healed. It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in the sight of all. And the signs that it is allowed to perform on behalf of the beast, it deceives the inhabitants of the earth, telling them to make an image for the beast and had yet been wounded, that had been wounded by the sword and yet lived. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast could even speak and cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. So imagine then that the priests of Rome, the officials, the centurions, the lawmakers, the governors, they come to the church that's in Asia, Turkey, um, which is a province of Rome, and they come and they say, "We're here from the emperor, and we're telling you that you have to worship the emperor, and if you don't worship the emperor, we'll kill you." They're allowed to give God. You have to worship him. And if you're a first century Christian hearing this, especially if you're living in Asia, you know exactly who these people are. You have to walk by them, you have to hide from them. They're scary. Verse 16, also it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell who does not have the mark, that is, the name of the beast, or the number of its name. So here we have they're not allowed to buy or sell unless you worship the beast. Um, Markets in the Roman world were places where there were lots of authorities around. Some of the marketplaces were dedicated to this god or that goddess, and to participate in society, you kind of had to go along with the state religion. maybe it's not an actual mark on your forehead or a mark on your hand, but in John's symbolic language, the beast, and the dragon become this mockery of God and Jesus and of the servants of God. We remember the 144,000 that were marked on the forehead with the image of God, with the name of God. Here, the beast is trying to be the same way. And we see that over and over and over again, that the beast and the dragon, they are trying to be like God, but then they are failing. Verse 18, this calls for wisdom. Let anyone with understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a person. Its number is 666. All right. So, all of this passage has been kind of leading up to that. And what we have here is that the people who are living there in Asia are seeing the true nature of evil. Um, the evil that exists in their land is ultimately given authority from the most evil thing, here represented by the dragon, who is the devil. Um, all evil kind of comes from the same place. It comes from an evil that rebels against God, and all evil, even the most powerful evil, is temporary. It's only going to be here for a little while. Um, and there's also a point here in that it shows that our enemy is not individuals. It's not the people that are also, in the state religion or something like that. The ultimate enemy is beyond them. It's past them. So we don't hate individuals. We hate evil. Um, the number 666, of course, has entered into the kind of the popular imagination. It's sort of interesting. It's sort of scary sounding. Three sixes in a row, 666. So there's been a lot of interpretation of it. Some people get nervous when they see 666 on a license plate, or if their barcode turns out to be 666 or something like that. I remember a few years ago the Pick 3 lottery in Oklahoma. The three numbers were 6, 6, and 6. And I remember they announced it on the news, and the newscaster went, "Ooh, that's not good." Well, if you play, the lottery every single day, or if you pull out the balls every single day, every once in a while, there's a 1 in 1,000 chance that it's going to be the number 666. First of all, um, it would be easy to say that the number 666 is important because it's three repetitions of a failure of seven. It's not quite seven. We always see with the seven bowls and the seven trumpets and the seven seals that the worst thing happens at six, but seven is always something good that happens because God comes in or the church comes in and something good happens. And so the best way to see is that all throughout these passages, the dragon, the beasts, they try to be like God, but they're ultimately just sort of a mockery of God. And the sixes are like that because they're not seven, which is a holy number, is God's complete number. But there's kind of an Easter egg here, and let's talk about that for a little bit. This is a tangent, but I think it's an important one. This is the one place in all of Revelation where there might be something that is just straight up a code. And we're going to crack that code right now. There's a practice in among people who speak Hebrew and among the Jewish people to add up the numbers of words. There's a few famous examples of this, which I'm not going to go into now, but basically, you take the letters, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, that's the Hebrew alphabet, and you say, okay, Aleph is 1, Bet is 2. Then when you get to 10, then the next one becomes 100, then 200, then 300, then 400. And through this, you're able to construct any number that you want. You kind of know this in Roman numerals, where you know that V is 5, I is 1, X is 10. We just had Super Bowl 51 or 50. I forget which Super Bowl it was, but it was LV. So it's 55. L is 50. V is 5. So the numbers in Hebrew all have, or sorry, the letters in Hebrew all have numbers associated with them. And there is a particular name of someone who was very scary to the Hebrew speaking people at the time. And that was, as we've already talked about, this fellow um, Nero. Nero Caesar would have been his full name, and traditionally, but not all the time, in Hebrew, there would be an N at the end of Nero, so you get something like Neron Caesar. Caesar would have the K sound, so it would actually be Neron Kaiser, and that's what I have written back here. In Hebrew, it would look like this. Hebrew is backwards, so we have Nero Caesar or Nero Kaiser. Um, and if we were to add up all of the numbers in Nero Kaiser, okay, well, we have two R's or ratios, and ratios are worth 200. You didn't know you're going to have to do math tonight. So 200 and 200. All right. We have a kof. That's a Q. And a Q is worth 20. It's like Scrabble. 20. All right. We have a summit. That's an S. And a summit is worth 60. Very good. We have two nuns. Nuns at the end of words look a little bit different. So that's a nun and that's a nun. And that's basically the letter N. And since we have two of those are each worth 50. And last but not least, we have this. This is a Vav. Sometimes it's a V, sometimes it's a W, but then weirdly enough, if it's in the middle of the word, sometimes it's an O. Um, Hebrew is funny like that. But a Vav, which is what this is worth 6. And you'll have already guessed it. If you add this all together, 200 and 200 is 400, 50 and 50 is 100, which add to that 400 is uh, 500. Oh, sorry, there's two 50s. Wait a second. I think I did something wrong. I don't know what I did wrong, but I think I did something wrong. Ah, yes, I know what it is. The ratios are the nuns. Sorry. What did I do wrong? I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. I know I've done something wrong here. Well, this is embarrassing, but needless to say, go look this up on the internet. My mistake here. These numbers should, if I knew how to do math. Oh wait, no, I think it does work out. I think it does work out, but it's 666. And actually, something that's kind of interesting is that you kind of say like, well, where did that extra in come from on the end of Nero? Like that doesn't need to be there. Okay, so actually, sometimes it would not be there, and so sometimes it would just be Nero Caesar. And there are copies of Revelation, very old copies of Revelation, where the number of the beast isn't 666, it's 616 because they get rid of one of the 50s, and 666 minus 50 is 616. Um, so really what's happening here is that the number is being used in lots of different ways. It represents failure, it represents not living up, it represents kind of this parody of God, but then it's also people would have been like, oh, wait a second, that's Nero. um, all of this comes back to the power of the emperor and the power of the Roman Empire. For us who are reading it now, who aren't scared about the Roman Empire anymore, we should instead know that evil can come in these sort of powerful systems, these powerful states. Anytime that there's a state sponsored religion is something we should be a little bit leery of, because sometimes it'll come under the guise of something good. It'll come under the guise of something that's able to do great miracles. It'll come under the guise of something that's able to wield great power. Um, and that's something that we don't need to be taken in by. Um, um, there's a lot more that I could say about that. But I want to get through chapter 14, and we're already going pretty late. So better get going. 14 chapter 14 kind of plays out in three different parts. Always whenever it seems like evil is going to win, then we always get a reprieve. And so we've had this dragon come, we've had this beast come, we've had the second beast come, and they've been given all this authority, and they're able to terrorize the Christians, and it's really terrible. But there, we see the Lamb on Mount Zion, and we see those 144,000